You've heard of a sophomore slump, where a band spends years developing material, they take their very best stuff, put it on an album, it becomes a hit, and then they go to write their second album, and they have no good ideas left. Ben Folds 5's Whatever and Ever Amen is more of a sophomore supernova. I'm a big Ben Folds fan, and so I wanted to do a video where I reviewed all of his albums in like 30 seconds a piece. So I was writing notes about Whatever and Ever Amen, and I ended up with like 2 pages of material about it, so it's getting its own video. This isn't going to be a fancy review. I just want to talk about each of the songs in order of my least favorite to my favorite. So we'll start with Smoke. Smoke is my least favorite song on the album, and as such, I don't feel like I should have to say very much about it. I don't know, is there anybody out there that loves Smoke? Is there something I'm missing about it? The next song is Song for the Dumps, which is very funny, but I almost always skipped because it had a lot of swears in it. The next track is Cigarette. This is a pretty interesting song. The story is that Ben took the lyrics from like a newspaper article that he saw, and it's very sad and kind of feels like a prose poem. It's very artsy and makes the album feel like a concept album, even though it's not. I would say that I appreciate the art of it, but it's not something that I feel like I need to listen to over and over. The next song is Steven's Last Night in Town. This is another weird track. Clarinet features prominently. It's about like a foreign exchange student. It contains the lyrics, "We were talking about something, seems like was funny, but then Steven got quiet. I think Steven was mad. Maybe he wasn't mad, but we all felt very strange in the moment. Then the moment was past and forgotten about." That's the kind of self-consciously affected verse that I think the first album has a lot more of that doesn't always work for me. So unfortunately, this is where I slot the song Brick. Now, I think Brick is a great song. Obviously, it's the most popular thing that Ben Folds or Ben Folds 5 ever released. A lot of people only know Ben Folds because of Brick. But for me, it doesn't crack the top half of songs on this album. And I know that that probably seems like oh, I'm a true fan. You know, this song's so overrated, overplayed. It's really not so much that for me, I don't think. So much as just that there's a lot of really stiff competition on this album. A lot of songs doing some really interesting and cool things. In fact, Brick doesn't even crack the top 3 ballads on this album for me. So one thing that I like a lot about Brick is that he was able to sort of stretch the Ben Folds 5 aesthetic and kind of bend the strictures of radio music far enough to meet somewhere in the middle, which is not something that is obvious would be possible, but it really works well in both worlds. Okay, the next 2 songs are a tie. The first is The Battle of Who Could Care Less. First of all, this song is just a jam, but musically it's very interesting because it has something that you very rarely see in popular music, or really any music that I've seen, which is whole tone chord progressions. Sounds like this. When I play that like that, it's like, oh, does that work? But man, in the context of the song, it sounds great. And it really is kind of on the boundaries of normal Western harmony, or at least the harmony of popular Western music. I have that song tied with Selfless, Cold, and Composed, which is about as close to true jazz as Ben Folds ever gets. Darren Jesse is doing swung eighths on the ride cymbal, lots of major sevenths, very jazzy. The bridge in that song is incredible, so I would highly recommend it. My next favorite song is Missing the War, and I'm counting this as one of the ballads that I like better than Brick. One little thing about this song, so one of the verses goes like this. She's sleeping like a baby. She doesn't know she wasn't meant for this. And for years I've thought it was really funny to, instead of saying those lyrics, say, she's sleeping like a baby. She doesn't like a baby. It's not a very funny joke, but it was funny to me. When you search the lyrics for this on Google, the first result actually includes the lyric, she doesn't like a baby, which now I've gaslit myself. Now I'm thinking I must have seen that somewhere rather than come up with it myself. This is a mystery that I cannot unravel. Those are not the lyrics. She's sleeping like a baby. She doesn't like a baby is not the lyrics, but as you can see, that's what it says on Google. So very strange. Also, I would recommend that you note the last verse into the last chorus, which is a masterclass in musical and lyrical tension into climax. Okay, for this slot, I have another tie. There's One Angry Dwarf and Kate. So One Angry Dwarf is probably the pinnacle of Ben Folds' special brand of punk jazz. It's got strange, vitriolic, and funny lyrics, so classic Ben Folds. And the initial brash piano theme is one of the most iconic album openers ever, in my opinion. It's amazing. Nobody else writes like that. So Kate is a personal favorite of mine. It's something that I sing with my siblings anytime we get together. And when I play it, I always try to break a string. Kate has a really fun mystery, which is it starting on the and of 4 or the 1? So here are the alternatives. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Seems straightforward, right? But then there's also 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 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 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. Both completely work, and I have spent years trying to figure out which one is correct. The song itself actually feels like it switches back and forth between them. Like the snare makes you think it's one thing, but then the bridge makes you think it's another thing, and it's just very confusing and amazing, delightful. There's a very, very small number of songs where I cannot confidently say where the downbeat is, and this is one of them. Also, if you like lyrical specificity, how about Down by Rosemary and Cameron, she hands out the Bhagavad Gita. Gotta love that. Okay, my second favorite song on the album is Fair. This is an odd choice, and I'm not even sure that I can defend it, but I just love Fair for some reason. I think what I love about it is the verse creates this swirling tension with this 2-chord loop that uses these really jazzy upper extensions that make you feel like you've never resolved. It's sort of reminiscent to me of like God Only Knows in that way, where it's like, what key are we in? Are we ever gonna find home? Layered over that, you have these like high fuzzed out bass notes with a lot of sustain, and you've got these little cymbal splashes here and there, and then these dissonant vocal harmonies that just swell and create this amazing sense of tension. And it's all followed up by this manic lyricless refrain of ba 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 ba. I will say I don't know how anyone could not like the almost disco-esque bridge, which I think is worth the price of admission. And the best track on Whatever and Ever Amen is Evaporated. So Evaporated is another ballad, and lest you think that my putting Brick so low means that I'm some sort of snobby enemy to pop, I will say that Evaporated is actually simpler and more repetitive than Brick. They both have this really, really vulnerable emotional core, and I've heard Ben Folds say somewhere that he is uncomfortable being in the room when someone's listening to that song because it's just so raw for him. While Brick is a more straightforward narrative about the time that he helped his girlfriend get an abortion, Evaporated has got more of a poetic veil on it. It's not as clear what it's about, but it's every bit as evocative. I actually think that Evaporated probably runs away with the prize for best lyrics that Ben Folds ever penned. It's sort of this perfect mix of poetic imagery and the natural speech register that Ben Folds usually likes to write in. There's a line that goes, "Don't you know I'm numb, man, no, I can't feel a thing at all, 'cause it's all smiles and business these days, and I'm indifferent to the loss." That's just gorgeous. I love the way that just kind of meanders around the time signature. So there you have it. That's my ranking of the tracks on Ben Folds 5's second album, Whatever and Ever Amen. So thinking about the album broadly, I think it's a really incredible record. It's one of my very favorites. It's not a perfect album, but I like the rough edges. And actually the production itself is sort of reflective of that. I feel like it feels raw enough to feel very authentic, but also professional enough to be listenable and to sort of compete with stuff on the radio. It's the kind of thing that is reminiscent to me of like great 60s albums, like from the Beach Boys or the Beatles, before it started to feel like a little bit slick, you know, in the production. So where the first album, Ben Folds 5, is a little bit hit or miss, has big ideas, but isn't quite fully mature. And the album after Whatever and Ever Amen, the unauthorized biography of Reinhold Messner, might be a little too confident and a little too weird, although it's probably my favorite of their albums. Whatever and Ever Amen is kind of this perfect happy medium. It's very drenched in their personality and very interesting and fun, but it's really listenable. It's really a jam. It has so much variety at such a high quality that I feel like I can recommend it to almost anybody pretty much without qualification, as long as you turn down the swears. She plays wipeout on the drum, squirrels and the birds come, gather round to sing the guitars. Oh, why have you got nothing to say? When all words fail, she speaks, her mixtape's a masterpiece. Walks in the garden so the roses can see. Have you got nothing to say? And you can see the daisies in her footsteps. And she speaks, and she breathes, I want to be Kate.